BlizzPro's coverage of BlizzCon 2014, brought to you in part by Steel Series. Winning is everything. Hey guys, we're here with Jason Chayes, Production Director for Hearthstone. He was the man on stage announcing Goblins versus Gnomes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. This is a great day.
Are you excited to finally get it out there? People know that it's there.
We've been looking forward to this day for a long time.
So, from what we know previously in Hearthstone, inventions tend to be a little risky, shall we say, when you finally put them on the board. And some of the cards that you previewed, they definitely display that sort of risky flavor. They might blow up in your face, you never know. Now, we don't see a lot of those cards in competitive play generally now, so we were wondering how you all were thinking about the competitive play arena when you were making Goblins versus Gnomes.
Competitive play is a huge part of Hearthstone, and so we wanted to make sure that there was definitely going to be cards in Goblins versus Gnomes that would speak to the very top levels of play. There are elements of randomness to kind of relate to what you're talking about in terms of the risky levels of play, but we believe that there's going to be very strong cards there, cards that competitive players were going to want to include in their decks, whether they're playing as a shaman, a priest, warlock, or mage, whatever it is, that will have a place in that top level play in the meta as well.
So then another question to follow up on that is, how does the existing meta of the game right now, how does that affect some of your design choices for Goblins versus Gnomes?
Overall we do pay a lot of attention to what's happening in the meta. We see particular deck types that are potentially get strong from time to time. So we have a team, basically a subgroup within our overall Hearthstone development team that's focused exclusively on balance. So they're looking to see which types of decks or classes are sort of at risk of maybe getting too dominant. And usually what we try to do is we don't try to go through a process of nerfing cards any more than we absolutely have to, because I don't think anybody likes seeing one of their cards that they've crafted or opened out of a pack nerfed over time. We'll do that on rare occasion when it's like the absolutely necessary. Yeah. But more than that, to speak to your question, what we really like to do is provide new tools to counter particularly powerful decks in the meta. One of the cards that we rolled out today was the Clockwork Giant. And so this is kind of one of the new Goblin versus Gnomes cards that actually gets cheaper to play. It's an 8/8. It gets cheaper to play for every card that your opponent has in his hand. So as your opponent starts sitting on more and more hands, which is in relation to some of the very popular deck types that are in the meta right now, then this could be a potentially good card for you to be playing. It's not necessarily a direct counter to that basically type of deck, because we don't really want to necessarily make particular deck types obsolete, but it is a good tool to put into your arsenal if you're running up a lot of those deck types.
Absolutely, play against the old miracle decks. That's good. Yeah. So did the idea for the direction of Goblins versus Gnomes, did it come from any particular team member, or sort of what drove this idea in particular?
There's a lot of reasons why we did this. Eric Dodds, who's our game director, actually was one of the guys who was very instrumental in coming up with Goblin and Gnomish technology when he was working on World of Warcraft back in the day. So I know this is a very passionate subject for him, but I think that the real reason why we settled on Goblins versus Gnomes, there was a few different reasons. One is that we were just coming off the Curse of Naxxramas, which was great, Hearthstone's first adventure. It definitely struck a particular tone of a little bit darker side, where we had a lot of undead and spiders running around. So we're kind of looking for a little bit of a way to shake it up and actually get something that's a little more lighthearted, whimsical, still potentially very explosive and destructive, but at least in a lighthearted way. So that was kind of one of the inspirations for Goblins versus Gnomes. Beyond that, we were just really excited about the idea of having these really cool inventions, these amazing creations, contraptions that the absolute best inventors in Azeroth's history could have come up with, and seeing what those things could do when unleashed in Hearthstone. So the idea of these inventions was another reason why we settled on that. But probably the third is because Goblins and Gnomes are a set of races that are very polarizing. People tend to either really love playing as their Goblins or Gnomes, or they're one of these races that people love to hate. So either way, Goblins versus Gnomes is for you.
Did you break any of the known conventions right now when you're making this set? We've never had a neutral weapon or a neutral spell, anything like that, or maybe some sort of new tricks that we've never seen?
Not directly. Indirectly we did. There's a card which is there's a new category of minion that we're introducing with Goblins versus Gnomes. That's the mech. And the mech is essentially kind of one of the most it sort of summarizes all the great automated creations that the Goblins and Gnomes have come up with. But one of the mechs that you'll find there is Blingtron. And what Blingtron does, it'll basically equip both players with weapons, random weapons. So you will for the first time, see mages running around with weapons. You'll see priests running around with weapons if Blingtron comes into play, and that happens to be you or your opponent. So in that sense, it is breaking convention. What happens when you see a mage running around with Doomhammer or something like that could definitely happen. But that's probably the biggest one that comes to mind.
Yeah, but at the same time, I can see, again, we have that, I see what you're saying, there's that balance of, there's that randomness, but at the same time, if you're in control of it, and you're playing a warrior where you have cards that are beneficial if you have a weapon, I could see that being useful, especially if you're playing against a mage. I'm like, well, you have nothing to help your weapon, so,
exactly. And so, for example, I could have Blingtron, and I could also have Acidic Swamp Ooze in my hand, so I could play this card, give myself a weapon, and then throw that down to get rid of it right away.
Very true.
So there's just different combos there, different ways to play that I think give, again, the strategic player choices on how they want to play these cards and kind of control the randomness to work in their favor.
Absolutely. So, at this point, we've had one adventure mode and now one expansion. Do you all have any sort of a timetable you have set up for future expansions, future adventure modes to keep a constant flow of new cards into the game?
We have some high-level ideas at this point. Like, we wanted to make sure that, our ultimate goal is to make sure there's fresh, interesting, dynamic, cool card content that's coming out. But we just want to be careful we're not doing that too quickly, because I think the risk there is particularly as we have a lot of new players coming to the game, we don't want to overwhelm people and actually have this giant card set with a lot of different ways to play all at the same time. So we really spent a lot of time thinking about when's the right time to release Goblins versus Gnomes, and after a lot of debate internally and looking at where our players were, we were like, this December, next month, is the right time to do it. But we're going to be paying a lot of attention to that and sort of seeing what the player response is to the amount of new cards coming in. Goblins versus Gnomes is a big set. It's
huge.
Curse of Naxxramas came out, introduced 30 or so new cards. This has more than 4 times as many cards as what we saw in Goblins versus Gnomes. As what we saw in Naxxramas. So given that, we do expect some pretty significant changes to the meta, to the way that people are playing, and to the different deck types that emerge from that. And so we're going to be watching that and see how that progresses over time, and actually use that as a test to sort of figure out what should the right cadence be moving forward into 2015 and beyond.
You ever thought about maybe doing larger adventure modes? So rather than 30, maybe having an even larger size adventure with more cards to it in the future?
We have discussed it a little bit internally. It sort of really comes down to what are we trying to do with the adventures, what's the goal of the adventures. We do want to kind of continue to move forward. We felt like Curse of Naxxramas was great. The idea of having a number of different wings with different AI bosses to play against, we felt worked really well. In terms of the amount of new cards coming out with future adventures, that might be something that we play with over time for sure.
What is your favorite card in Goblins versus Gnomes?
One of the ones that we just highlighted a little while ago at our panel, we have a category of mechs in Goblins versus Gnome that are called the piloted mechs. And the way these work is I will play my mech and we'll go and do battle. And because it's piloted mech, of course the Goblins and Gnomes want to ride in style. So these are not necessarily automatons. These are ones that actually have a pilot in these things. And so when a piloted mech is destroyed, you'll see a parachute shoot up in the air and will kind of come swinging down to land and play. And that'll actually have a random minion attached to it. So my favorite Goblins versus Gnome card is probably Sneed's Old Shredder, which is the largest of these piloted mechs. And the way it works is when Sneed's Old Shredder blows up, you'll see a random legendary from the entire game of Hearthstone will come parachuting down. So it might be Lord Walker Cho, or it might be Deathwing. You're not really sure which one's going to come, and they obviously have very different effects on the game.
Very.
Depending on which one shows up.
Wow. That sounds like a lot of fun. So we haven't heard much about how this is going to get rolled out. We know there's going to be packs. Is there going to be like a free starter pack or a paid starter pack, or how are people going to jump into Goblins versus Gnomes?
We want to make sure that we'll have the ability for players to check out the new content, basically look at the new card packs as we go. We're still locking down exactly how that's going to be rolled out and have some kind of cool ideas in store for players when we get there. But for right now, yes, rest assured there will be an opportunity to check out some of those packs. You'll still be able to earn these packs just by playing for free. You'll be able to earn the gold you need to buy the card packs through the in-game store. You can also use real money if you prefer to go that path. Either way works great.
Okay. So we're growing this slate of cards, by 120. Is there any plan, has there been any thought to eventually retiring certain cards? You think Magic the Gathering, there's, these Legacy and these Type 2 and that sort of thing. Has there been any thought to that thus far?
Usually when that happens is when the card set becomes so big that it's really hard to just kind of get a sense of where you want to go. Also, that happens as particular sets start to move out of play and players don't really have the chance to kind of get one of these older sets, that it's a way to kind of keep a level playing field. For right now, it's not something that we have in store for the near term for Hearthstone. There is a world where that might become necessary down the road, but we feel like we have a lot of space and a lot of room to grow before that becomes a necessity. So for right now, we feel pretty good about keeping it with the consistent where everybody can play with the same card set all together.
That's true, and since it's digital, there's no fear of people not being able to go and get the original set because it's always there.
Correct.
That's true. Let's talk crafting for a second.
Sure.
So is there going to be sort of a new type of dust with these new cards to differentiate, or is it just going to go to the same dust pool and creation pool?
So it's the exact same dust pool. So you could dust one of your existing expert cards, collect that dust, use it to reassemble a Goblins versus Gnome cards when they launch. And the crafting cost for the Goblins versus Gnome cards will be the same for the equivalent rarity on the expert side.
That was my next question, so that's good. Spectator mode.
Yes.
This was announced. We've known about it, but heard nothing in the opening ceremony.
Yes.
Why was that?
Because we like surprises. The whole idea behind Goblins versus is kind of cool, awesome surprises. So we had one more surprise that we wanted to roll out a little later in the day. And so, yes, we just announced a couple hours ago that we're in addition to the awesome new cards coming out with Goblins versus, we're also rolling out Spectator mode. We're very excited about this feature. We think it's going to be great.
You're excited. We're excited. We run some of the fireside gatherings.
Oh,
and
nice.
It would be so helpful.
Yeah, so you will be able to, for sure, use this as a moderator in a fireside gathering to see both players at the same time. Basically, as a so you'll be able to see the one player's hand, the other player's hand, and kind of check out what's happening in the games as they go.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to hear. We were wondering. So, are we going to see any of these like weekly teasers like we saw with Next Ramus to give us little hints of the things that are coming up, or how do you plan to get us all hyped up for the new set?
There will be some fun things coming. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I think wait till next week. You'll see some awesome stuff coming out, and we have a lot of cool ideas leading up to the launch.
Fun things coming. You heard it.
Yes, glorious fun.
How do you plan to introduce these cards to the arena? Are they going to be all at once when the set comes out, or is it going to be like a slow launch? How is it going to be done?
As soon as Goblins vs. Gnomes launch, you'll start seeing Goblins vs. Gnomes cards in there. They will be available. They kind of trigger off the same conditions as what's happening right now with the expert cards. As you kind of get to, okay, now I've hit the card draw where I'm hitting a rare, and I kind of see that trigger, and those could be filled up with the Goblins vs. Gnomes cards, basically the whole along the way. They'll be intermixed with the expert set. One of the things we are going to do is once Goblins vs. Gnomes launches, the reward you're taking with you out of Arena will also be a Goblins vs. Gnomes card pack.
Cool. Now, let's talk competitive stuff a little bit here. Are there any lessons learned? You had your sort of first World Championship leading up to that. What kind of lessons have you learned in this first, not even full year, of a professional competitive circuit?
We've talked a little about the meta and kind of this monitoring the meta and kind of really staying on top of the meta. So we've actually kind of really grown our team to be able to support the amount of balance to sort of teams like I mentioned earlier to watch that and look out for any issues with that. So I think keeping an eye on that. I think another thing is making sure Spectator mode was rolled out largely in response to a lot of the feedback we got from the community on that we really wanted a way to watch these matches, to share it with my friends. So I think that was a lesson for us too, is just making sure that we can support the ways that the competitive scene is growing as well. Beyond that, another thing that's been great for us is just how involved the community has been. We had some ideas about what would be interesting ways and interesting formats to see competitive level Hearthstone played. But the format we're using now, which is essentially called Last Hero Standing, largely came about in collaboration with the community. So the idea of having picking 3 different classes, maybe a 4th if we have a veto capability, and then seeing basically 2 players, instead of just doing single elimination, double elimination with their one deck, having the ability to sort of, I've eliminated Priest, now next up is Rogue, eliminate Rogue, okay, fine, my last chance now is with Warlock, kind of just becomes a very dramatic, fun way to experience the game. And so I think that's been a big lesson for us too, is just looking at new creative ways that competitive Hearthstone can be played, and really building that back into the formal, official Hearthstone tournament structure.
So you have plans to implement some of these sort of modes and things into the game itself? Because I know when we run our own tournaments, things like that would be helpful, like a built-in way to do Last Hero Standing, to where it forces a player to pick their 3, right, and they get locked in. Certain things like that would be really helpful. Have you all been entertaining any of those ideas to help the local scene to implement their own tournaments with a smaller staff?
We have, and so like this is again kind of how Spectator Mode came up, was to try and give some of that functionality to help some of those local smaller size tournaments to be able to monitor games and make sure they're being played fairly. In terms of different formats, we don't have any plans right now to factor that back into the client. I could definitely see us doing that in the future if that becomes something the community is really looking for. But one of the things we're trying to walk the line of is just making sure that as we add new features, that they're the features that the largest part of the community is really excited about, that everybody will use. Because every time we add something new, it does add some more complexity, it adds some more UI elements. And we want one of the, I think, real strengths to Hearthstone is its simplicity and accessibility. So we're trying to find ways to kind of fold those together. But again, if that's something the players are really looking for, I could see us folding that in.
Well, if we have any time, we can certainly take a look at it.
Sure. I believe we're all set. Let's try to start up. There you go. Now your first most important choice is, what is your allegiance?
Going no.
I'm going Goblin. Okay. So you'll definitely see a lot of our new cards that we just talked about here. You'll also see some ones that we haven't yet kind of really done a lot of projects with, so you'll get a chance to check out some of those. All right.
So I want to look at that one before I get rid of it.
So you'll also see our new board here, so you can kind of see it animated and come to life. What will you do? What gnomes can I expect?
As long as we're playing for the camera, I shouldn't skip a turn. So.
The Shrinkmeister.
Not quite so useful on turn one, but
I will bring out the Mech Warper. Well played. Use that very effectively. I'm going to go with a tried and true Goblin for this one.
haha.
Wow, that is a big gnome.
Not something you hear often.
Okay, we're going to use my mage spell here now. Unstable portal.
Nice effect.
And we got one more Mad Bomber.
Is it overkill? What do we think? No, it's fun.
Wow, that is an even bigger gnome. Okay, I should probably do something about that pretty soon.
Probably.
I don't think I have a lot of great options though.
You're a mage. You should have all kinds of options.
I have a very goblin heavy mage at the moment. I do have a Maexna card though.
Always a good one. But we have bigger things.
Blingtron. There you go. See, we talked about it earlier.
Oh dear.
And you caught an Arcanite Reaper
This
as a
just
priest.
isn't fair for you, is it?
That is problematic for me. I think that's GG.
That Not quite.
Almost. I have maybe one chance. Okay. Doomhammer isn't helping me too much right now.
I'm about to beat a BlizzPro guy.
All right.
Guy. Oh my god.
Yeah, I can't do a whole lot about that.
No surprise there.
Yeah, we're gonna go for the fun chaos as I go out in a ball of flame. You actually did more damage to me, I think, than it did to you. And now I will end Jaina. Well done.
There you go.
Well played.
Those are some fun cards.
It's not every day you see your priest walking around with an Arcanine Reaper.
It's definitely not. It's a little frightening, actually. So, well, thank you.
Of course.
Great interview and a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming by.
Yes, looking forward to the set.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to you guys checking it out.